Hi folks, it's me, your local chaotic witch aunt. And today, I'm answering your questions about ancestral veneration and ancestors. I promised this video maybe 6 to 8 months ago and I never got around to it, but I've had all of your questions in a notes app and I've kind of been organizing them this entire time. Yeah, and I think that moving into 2025, I'm filming this on January 20th. I want, giving this kind of access, talking more about these things, all this good stuff happening, teaching more, all of these things that I talked about, like dedicating more time to in 2025, you can find in my last video. But this is kind of step one where I think that we need ancestral magic more now than ever. I think that it's time for me to start giving more information about that. I realized recently, whether I like it or not, I am a community leader for a lot of people, and I am someone that people trust with information and trust to go to. That's something that I don't take lightly and something that I feel like I've built in a lot of ways. So this is me starting to disperse more information to people. And I think getting back into YouTube again is another big thing that I really wanted to do. That this is kind of step one. I want to do videos I feel good about, and I feel really good about this video. I also wish I had my glasses. Do I have a normal cleaning cloth? Yeah, somewhere. Am I gonna spend 10 minutes trying to find it? No. I have a new book coming out this year, literally called Ancestral Magic. You can pre-order it in my caption. And this is a great time to announce on January 20th that last year I was attending Salem Witchcraft and Folklore Festival for the press aspect of it, and this year I shall be returning as a presenter. My class is entitled The Bane and Blessing of Italian American Folk Magic, Exploring Communal Protection, Cures, and Justified Work. A little more about it. This is part lecture, part theoretical lecture, part workshop. I will be kind of talking through in an introduction to Italian and Italian American folk magic, important aspects of the culture to understand the workshop. Then I will talk more about community as protection. I'll be pulling from my experiences, my teachings, and also resources. And then I'll be talking about cures. What is a cure? What does that mean? We'll be connecting and talking about connecting with some ancestral folk magic elements. And then the more theoretical part will be kind of curses. What even are Italian curses? Everyone knows about the really strong protective elements of Italian American folk magic, but why don't we talk about curses? Why don't we do curses? What's going on there? So we're gonna kind of explore that, and then explore kind of maybe why people are more hesitant to do it, why what the kind of cultural understanding of curses are, and then kind of what can we learn from it? What would it look like to explore that in the context of justified work, in the context of using curses against our oppressors, but also, is that taking out of its cultural context? This section is probably going to be more questions than answers. Don't come prepared to learn about curses or know anything. It's mostly I don't know what I'm doing in that area, and I'm I don't know what the right answer is, and it's a more question, kind of making space for possible answers than anything else. But onto the video. Hold on. I got pink tea. Literally. So there were a lot of questions that came in when I asked for this video, to the point where I've created separate sections, which we'll go through in a moment. But I also think that I need separate videos on this. So I'm probably going to work on a video about strengthening your relationship with your ancestors. And so you want to start ancestor veneration. And that's kind of where we'll go from there. So sections we'll be working on today: approaching ancestors and identifying ancestors, communicating with ancestors, making ancestor work accessible and consistent, types of ancestors, kind of ancestral spirits, and then miscellaneous or other. So I don't know if you remember my last Q&A video, but it really or my New Year's Eve tradition video, I sorted everything. That's what I did here. So we're starting off in the area that I think is most appropriate to start an ancestor video on, which is approaching ancestors and identifying them. What do you include in your first ancestral space, and why? What are appropriate offerings? In all honesty, I talk a lot about this in my forthcoming book, but also your first ancestral space can kind of look however you want. It doesn't really need anything. I know people with really, really elaborate ancestor altars. I know people with a white candle and a glass of water, and that's what they can manage. Things that you can include in a first ancestral space include like pictures of family members or items that belong to them, things that they may have liked, food, rosaries. For me, I have like a can of lentils because lentils are big. We love lentils. Several rosaries, some pictures, and some items that belong to them as well. For appropriate offerings, I mean, this kind of depends on who you ask. Sometimes ancestors, certain traditions have certain offerings that are appropriate for ancestors. For me, I like to give flowers. I usually like to have some form of a drink on their altar: water, coffee, wine, amaro, any of those things. Any sort of food is appropriate. I have like almond cookies on my ancestor altar right now, but different things are going to be different for tradition, if that makes sense. Like, I know folks that are like, I would never do that with my ancestor altar. I go, oh, okay. And if you have certain kind of notions in your tradition of which offerings are like associated with like doing certain things, then you're probably not going to give certain offerings until it's necessary. So, I mean, a first ancestral space, I'm looking at mine, I would say if you're looking for like an outline and you don't want me to just be like, whatever you want, which I know that's how I am. Get a picture of the person if you have it. If you don't have a picture, take a candle, write to all ancestors, known and unknown, or write their names on it. The candles I like using at this point are just plain white candles, or we have these Venerazione degli Antenati. Italians, please correct me if I'm wrong on that part. My pronunciation is still shit. This is a ancestral veneration candle that I made in collaboration with Black Candle Cottage. They're probably gonna be restocked like next week. I dress all of them myself. It has a prayer on the back and instructions for use, and then in the front you can kind of put names here. I like using this. I have one for my matriarchs and one for my patriarchs, and I dress them differently depending on that. I have my great grandma's altar is in my office. She's the only one in here. Everyone else is in the family room, but she has her picture, a rosary I offered to her, an oil, my oil of the matriarchs, a perfume, a rose like tincture type thing, a little offering cup, and then a candle, some roses that need to be replaced, she keeps reminding me, and a little like fossilized coral ring. And so this is an altar for her, but also for an ancestor that I don't have a picture of, because that matriarchal kind of oil was made for both of them and all the matriarchs in my family. So having that on the altar kind of calls them all in, and the roses have associations with multiple of my ancestors. I would say keep your altar living. This is something that I learned from Mary Beth Von Figlio, of course. There's so many. I always try to cite when I talk through these things of who I learned this from. Altars are living spaces. They are meant to be living alive and continuously fed and replenished, and allow it to kind of be a fluid waking space, not just a stagnant space. And that's something that I'm still working on, that I can't give many tips on. Moving on, how do you go about finding which regions your ancestors are from? This one is a little bit more complicated. I would say start with any living relatives that may remember. Depending on how far back it is, sites like Ancestry.com can offer some semblance of it, but this also depends on your background. White people have notoriously an easy, or European folks in general have European like ancestry folks have notoriously an easier time finding this information than many other people who've immigrated from other places, and that sometimes depends on if that information was purposefully erased in the case of indigenous folks, if it's just kind of been lost to genocide in the case of Armenian folks. It really depends on like the way that I did it. I kind of was very privileged in the fact that like my mom knew where our family came from, and I can like trace our last name there, but it's not as simple. So it kind of depends on like Utilize ancestry.com, talk to living relatives to see if they remember what they remember about the landscape and go from there. Also ask your ancestors for help with that. But don't be discouraged if it's difficult or it's something that's really hard to do. Where to even start with working with ancestors? I mean, just kind of start. I don't know how to answer this. Just kind of start. Like, I would start with making an ancestor altar. That saying, like, all ancestors known and unknown, is a great way to call them in and say, what's up? What are we doing? Where are we going? And that's a great way of doing it. I mean, I started working with my ancestors because I had an interest in the folk magic and the ancestral folk magic, and that's kind of what started me there, because you can't connect to an ancestral folk magic or a culture without understanding the folk that it comes from. And I've seen that conversation happening a lot, which I'm like, I think I should make a video on it as well, where it's like, if we're practicing folk magic, you need to have a folk. But I'll talk about that at another time. But that's just start with an ancestor altar. Start with just calling them into your life and asking for their help with things and see where that gets you. Can I honor a recently passed away family member by using things they liked and not based off the heritage of my family? Yes. Yeah, there are things on my altar that are really just for one specific ancestor, because I'm like, you liked this, here you go, that aren't about heritage. And then I'm a mixed person, so I was wondering if I could honor my culture as a way of honoring my ancestors without having fully knowledge of who they are. Yeah, that's a fantastic way to practice ancestral veneration. Honoring culture that they came from and their ancestral culture, which is also your ancestral culture. That's a great way of doing it. Whenever we start doing it, if we're outside of that culture, and this is kind of something that I've talked about before, but ancestors we always have access to, they are inside us. Culture is something external that we need to be enculturated in to understand. I will never be an Italian. I don't live in Italy. I am an Italian American, which is a diasporic offshoot of Italy and Italian culture, so it's affected by Italy and Italy's culture, but it's still a separate thing that's grown and morphed and changed over time, separate from Italy. So be mindful when we start honoring the culture, that we're not kind of an outsider imposing ourselves in something, which it's one of those things that I think is a really interesting conversation, because I feel like when we think of cultural appropriation, we think of someone taking a culture from someone else that's not theirs, but a lot of times it's really easy for us to appropriate a culture that we believe is ours. Ancestry and heritage does not mean that you automatically have access to the magic, the culture, the rituals, the social structure that exists in that country today, especially if you've been divorced from it from a very long time, and especially if you are working to reconnect with it. I hope to one day be reconnected more with the Italian culture of, the people in Italy right now, but I don't live in Italy. I am an American. Italian American. So we have a piece of that, but we have to honor that diasporic culture as well. And that for me was a lot of my reconnection journey, is connection to the diasporic culture, because that's what I am. And so I was outside of the Italian American culture, because I really wasn't involved in it or in the community at all up until a couple years ago, 4 years ago. And then when I started reconnecting, people were like, oh, you're an Italian American, welcome. And over time, I've been given more pieces of the culture and more pieces of information and learned more from other people, because I've been in the community with them. And there's a respect factor there too. This is a whole thing. I don't even know if this is what you meant. And I don't even know if this is what you meant, but it's important to talk about. But we have to be like, for example, like me being an Italian American doesn't mean that I get to walk in somewhere and be like, my ancestors were Italian or my family members were Italian, so I get this. And this is now, I have access to it and it's mine. That's a really colonizing mindset. It just is. Just because we have heritage somewhere, ancestry someplace, doesn't mean we are automatically allowed to receive access to certain things from within that culture because we feel entitled to it. So yeah, that's my spiel about, and I can answer questions on that too. Can you ask ancestors who were passed on for things? Yes. Like loved ones, family, or friends, do you approach ancestors you knew in life differently than ones who died before you were born? And then, do you have opinions on working with very recent ancestors? Yes, so I was taught that you should wait a year before working with anyone who's died very recently. That's just what I was taught. I literally have no idea where it came from. So I didn't start venerating my grandma and my papa, who I knew in life, until a year after they passed. And I do ask them for things. I don't think I approach them any differently. They're both family. I think there's a closer tie because I knew them in life. I knew more about things that they may want as an offering. But they're still an ancestor, they're still a family member, and I think that we need to be mindful too of like romanticizing ancestors we never met or family members, or putting them on a pedestal when we do this work, or romanticizing homeland or home country. I mean, I love Italy, and I have a lot of friends who are Italian living in Italy, and a lot of followers who are Italian living in Italy. I love you guys, hello. But also the reality of that was that my ancestors immigrated out of Italy and left Italy because they were just in a really bad situation. Like, it was a lot of poverty and fascism and all of these really terrible things. That is still the history of Italy, and we need to know that so we don't repeat it. So we don't do it again. But we can't romanticize, like, that is just, we can't romanticize the ancestors we didn't know. They're still human, they're still ours. They're still, you know, have their flaws. And we may know the flaws of those recently passed on ancestors a little more because we lived with them. But at the same time, we have to make room for our ancestors to be family. We're not always going to agree on them with them. We're not always going to love what they say. And sometimes you got to set a boundary, and that's normal. How do I know who is watching over me? Like, which ancestors from which side of the family? So this is a more complicated question. I think that there's not really a surefire way of doing that. It really is something along the lines of, like, I personally kind of knew it was there's like meditations that I've been taught and methods of asking that we can do. I mean, honestly, my best answer would be divine on it. Take a tarot card, take a playing card deck, say who's on this, say, is it this side? Yes. Is it this side? No. Is it, and just kind of figure it out from there. I would say tarot and ascribe like this court card or this suit represents this side of the family. This suit represents this side of the family. This suit represents this side of the family. So pentacles are father's father. Cups are mother's mother. Wands are father's mother. And swords are mother's father, right? And then you can kind of see where you go with that. That's an example. I have never done that, so I can't say if it works, but that's like, I would honestly say like divine on it. You can also kind of note what kind of things they are trying to push you to learn, and that may give you an answer as well. I was not very close with my grandparents, but I never kind of visited or talked to them. I feel like if I try to venerate them now, it would be disrespectful, because why did you not come when we were alive? And if I skip to much older ancestors, it would also be disrespectful, because why do I approach people I did not know in life, but not those I knew? Do you have a similar experience? Have any advice? I mean, you know your family better than I do. In this situation, I don't think it would be disrespectful to, I don't think it's ever disrespectful to honor our dead. Even if we struggled to see them in life, and even if we weren't close with them, right? And now's a chance for you to write that. So yeah, there may be a bit of pushback of being like, well, why didn't you come see me when you're alive, right? But you can be like, well, I'm seeing you now. Or like, here are these factors. Because usually it's not just we don't go see them. It's, you know, they're external factors. So kind of explore those external factors and look at like, do I want their advice? And then if not, it's not bad to go to older ancestors who may have different advice to give. And so like I said, you know your family better than me. I personally wouldn't see that as disrespectful, but I think it truly depends on what you feel is going to be best. Part 2, communicating with ancestors. How do you personally experience a response from ancestors? And how do you know specifically what they are saying to you? How do they communicate, and how do you feel that advice and guidance come through? I have been doing an exercise with folks recently in tarot readings where they're like, I don't know how to talk to my ancestors. And I'm like, okay, so I'll just guide you through it right now. If you're comfortable, and if you want to revisit this part later, let me know. Just like close your eyes, bring some awareness to your body. Call in your ancestors, say, hey, I want you to be present with me. And I know as soon as I say that, I have places in my body, I feel it. So pay attention to where in your body you're feeling it. For me, it's like the heart, the sternum, all the way down to the upper stomach. And that's also kind of where they show up, surprisingly, in aura photos. So my ancestors tend to talk with me through my heart and my tummy. You can open your eyes now if you're comfortable. Just kind of note where you felt that. Sometimes it kind of depends on the person. For me, I feel things really deeply and I'm very sensitive to a lot of things. Not just spirits, like loud noises and flashing lights and all these fancy things. We love sensory processing issues. So sometimes it's like a thought that pops into your head that doesn't feel like yours. Like it doesn't totally make sense. You weren't thinking about it as a train of thought. It's just there. And there are gonna be some people who are like, isn't that just a thought? Or isn't that an intrusive thought? I don't know. Most of the time it's not like angry. It's just, I'm doing something, like I'm doing a ritual or I'm cleaning or I'm divining with them, and I can kind of feel what they want me to pay attention to, and I can kind of also make out what they're saying in my head. I don't actually hear them. I kind of make out what they're saying in their head. And then sometimes they give me images, I've gotten images of how to set up certain spells, how to do X, Y, and Z. Like, you should cook it this way. I'll be cooking and be like, you should put that in before you do that. And I'm like, okay, that's not what the recipe says, but I'll do it your way. It's very personal because that's also how I experience a lot of spiritual things. I feel it in my body. There's just like a knowing of like, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this, or I know that this is a spirit talking to me. And that also comes with confidence in claircognizance and clairabilities, and also comes from kind of allowing them a vessel to occupy. When you're talking with ancestors or a spirit of any kind, you have to just like let them come. You can't force it. And so a lot of times, and so this is something I've trained over years. I've had a relationship with my ancestors for a while. At the beginning, I didn't really get any sort of messages from them like this. I really could only connect and communicate with them when I was ingesting certain like herbs or plants, because that connected me to them. And over time, they've realized that I am very open to their communication at a lot of different points, even if I'm not doing anything. So I am kind of creating a door just for them. And there's also a trust in that, like, I know it's when it's them, and if I'm not sure, they'll give me confirmation. And at the same time, there's a bit of an opening, like a vessel. That's what I am a lot of the time. When I do readings, when I talk to them, I'm a vessel. They come through me, they talk through me, they work through me. I am just a little cup waiting to be filled. And I got my own things, my own water in that cup, right? I'm not just like spirit, like I have my own. You have autonomy. You're allowed to say no. But for me, I hear them and speak with them most through the body. So like one time I sat down to do divination with them. I lit both of their candles. I pulled my Scopa cards. And I didn't notice this until I sat down, but immediately I realized how hungry I was. I was so hungry. My stomach was growling. And I didn't notice this before I sat down, right? Before I was just doing things. It allowed me the space to slow and be a vessel and realize how hungry I was. And then the immediate kind of reaction I felt, the thing that I heard was like, "What, have you not fucking eaten today?" And I'm like, I'll eat after this. And it's like, you need to eat. Like, literally, like, when I feel how hungry I am, they feel how hungry I am. Our ancestors are in our bodies. They are us. We are them. So to trust your body in the senses it gives you, and to trust your mind and what they give you, is to trust your ancestors, because they are you. You are them. It's kind of like that. They also talk to me through dreams, which is like a whole other thing I'm deciphering in this moment. I'm struggling to know if my ancestors are there with me. On the point of my last one, they are always with you. You can't get away from them. They're in your body. They're in your genetics, even if you're adopted. And here's the thing, is like, you'll get people who are like, only blood-related ancestors count. No, they don't. If you've been brought into a family, you are now a part of that family. Your ancestors are with you. You were raised by people that maybe you weren't blood related to. They're still your parents. They still walk with you because they're your parents. We don't need genetics to tell us who our family is. We don't. I mean, like, you can, but like, I have so many ancestors that aren't biologically related to me, and when I call them in, they're just as strong and talk in the same way, because like, it's something that they're always with you. They're your family. Do you know how hard it is to get rid of these guys? Offerings and prayer for a dedicated altar for about 3 to 4 years now. If you're not feeling anything, even though you're kind of, you are seeing your requests being manifested, which is great. Try kind of the exercise I gave you of where to feel in your body in this video, and also try, like, when you're divining, kind of imagine, literally imagine your brain being a house, and you kind of have all your protective wards in your house, and then you kind of open the door and you only let in certain folks. And then there's like a force field around your head, and you make it semi-permeable. You have to allow yourself to empty and listen to receive. Try slowing down, try eating foods that are associated with them. Try kind of, I mean, for me, the way that I really learned from them and solidified this connection with them was through Della Medicina with Lisa Fazio and learning from the plant teachers. So connecting with ancestral plant allies is a really big way of connecting with them. How do I do divination to know that I am speaking with my ancestors? And how do you learn traditional forms of divination? That will be dependent on your tradition. Figure out a traditional method of divination that your ancestors did, and then find someone who does it. Start researching it. So for me, I was like, okay, Italian playing cards is what I want to do. Like, I really want to do this. And then I found someone who I was like, you know what, you've made a lot of posts about Italian playing cards. Do you happen to know how to read them? And they were like, I'm like, can you help me? And they're like, yeah. Some methods I still don't know. Bean throwing. Not a lot of information on throwing the beans. I hate how that sounds. But like, that's an example. Like, there's like a lot of different divinations, and usually it's passed from someone to someone else. So this requires kind of being in the community of the culture, because you're learning like a culturally relevant method of divination, not just a traditional method. Learning from the community members and kind of finding someone who may know about it, and kind of seeing what resources they have available and going from there. If you want to know how to do divination that knows that you're speaking with your ancestors, dedicate a deck to them. Dedicate a tarot deck to them. For me, Italian playing cards, like, I use them for a lot of things, but primarily it's their deck. They talk to me through it because it's the only Italian thing. Like, that it's just, sometimes they just kind of show up in that way. A lot of times, the more ancestral kind of community and culturally relevant divination methods are the ways your ancestors will choose to show up to you. So traditional forms of divination too, I mean, you could mean what people traditionally did to communicate with their ancestors, which in that case, once again, depends on tradition and culture and all these things. I think we think that people ritualized ancestral veneration a little, like a lot. A lot of it was just, it's just a natural state of our consciousness to honor our dead. Like, a lot of folks just kind of honor their dead, and that's how they talk to them. I'm sure that there are traditional methods of like, how do we talk to spirits? But ancestors are, like I said, they walk with you, they're in you. You don't have to do that much to talk to them. It's a lot simpler than you would think. What to do if you aren't feeling a response? Every time I reach out, I feel like I'm talking to a wall. That's something that I think, I mean, you asked, could this be because they don't want me to reach out to them? I doubt it. I mean, I talked about an emptying. I mean, a lot of this is practicing spirit communication, but very kind of easier ways to talk to ancestors include ingesting ancestral foods, ingesting ancestral plant allies, flower essences are safe, ingesting like ancestral drinks, starting to participate more in that kind of things that venerate them and honor them. And then they kind of start getting a little louder. Sometimes they're not quite sure what we want. And I mean, I have some ancestors who are super chatty and some who aren't. Talking to people by name can help. I mean, I have one ancestor who like it's my Nana, like she barely speaks to me. The rest of them are really chatty. My most recent ancestors are like, you got this. I'm like, okay. Try some of the things that we're doing, that meditation exercise I gave you, and try kind of physically doing things that put you in proximity with them. Doing something, celebrating a holiday that they celebrated. Anything along those lines. Remember our conversation about culture and that kind of stuff as well when you're doing this, but that may be helpful. How to stay consistent with ancestor veneration. How do you incorporate it in day-to-day life? I've been chronically ill, so it's not as good, but I try to give, they kind of made it clear for me what they want. Fresh coffee every day. Some time kind of spent on the altar at the morning or at night telling them about my life as of recently. If you can't do that every day, do it once a week. Fresh flowers once a month for them. And it's really just kind of integrating you being at that altar in your everyday. Like we talked about making the altar a live space. That's a really great way of doing it. And for me, a lot of it was reconnecting with Italian American culture, learning Italian American folk magic, connecting with them through that and venerating them through that, and kind of starting to share what they were giving me with everyone. And that's how I venerate them. Like everything I do at this point is a veneration to them. You have to just learn how to integrate certain things. So maybe you're like, okay, well, I know my ancestors made this specific meal on this specific day, so start doing that. Or maybe you want to learn the language, start doing that. Part of it is tending to their altar spaces, but also part of it is kind of keeping them in the loop with your life. Being like, what's up? Let me tell you about this. Explain inflation to them if you have the chance. Tell them about a game you played. They're your family. How do you talk to your family? How do you keep your family in your life and active? How do you do that? How often do you see them? Go from there. Ancestral spirits. What is the best way to connect with saints that feel like or have an ancestral connection to your lineage or family? Get them a statue. You can get them a statue. If you don't have the money for the statue, that's fine. But literally, just start petitioning them. Get them a statue if you have the capability. Set up a space for them and a candle for them. Some saints don't like that. A lot of saints like saint statues. Cult of the Saints, get a little saint statue. My first Saint Anthony statue was like this yay high, and I stuffed a bunch of petitions under his feet. And I kept him around. And just kind of start incorporating praying to them and normal things. Give them offerings too. If you petition, get something in return. I venerate different gods and deities for my ancestors, so do I call in theirs or mine to assist me in workings or communication? Do I need to, or can I talk directly to them? You can talk directly to your ancestors and ask them for things. This is also a preference. You can call in yours or theirs. That's up to you. I think that there's a benefit in working with ancestral deities, but we don't have to. You don't have to do any of this. Sorry, that sounded really sarcastic, but I mean it. You don't have to work with ancestral deities. For me, that's just how my practice ended up. I didn't feel like you got a choice in that, but you don't have to, especially if you already have a relationship with certain gods. This depends too on if your ancestors were in a specific area or tradition that they just don't want you to touch the gods that you're working with now. But that's, I think, very personal. How do you bring together ancestors of varied cultures? On separate altars. You put them on separate altars. I just don't. That's how I roll. That's how I rock and roll. Just because they're so different. I don't want the immigrants of my family on the same altar with the people who came over many, many years ago from Europe and Britain, How do you find regional resources on folk magic or ancestor work? I will give you the resource that I use for Calabrian folk magic, which is academia.edu. It's like a database where professors can upload, or people who wrote articles can upload their articles for free. It's free to use. At the same time, knowing like someone who's also either diasporic or from that region or kind of knows more about it is the best way to do that. Because in the academic articles, it's usually from an outsider's perspective. You have to be in the community and in the culture and kind of talk with people from that region who are now in your diasporic culture to understand that more fully. And that's the best way to do it, which takes time. So be patient with yourself. How do you go about navigating relationships with ancestors you didn't know in their lifetime? How do you identify them? I tend to, you can get like a reading with someone to identify them. For me, I have pictures, and I'm just like, all right, putting up your altar with your picture on it. What's up? My name's Frankie. I'm a descendant. I want to call you into my practice more, and I want to call you into my life. Oftentimes, giving them a physical space is calling them in. And navigating relationships with them that you didn't know, just like you navigate a relationship with someone now. Be patient, give it time, set boundaries where needed, be direct, give them a space, show them you care about them, see what happens. Other miscellaneous. We're rolling fast because my camera's about to die. So can you learn specific lessons from specific ancestors? I think yes. I also think it's a group thing. I think that ancestors are a collective, and very specific ancestors can give us specific things to aid us. How do I know they will approve of my practice? I don't know. Call them in and see what happens. This is where we get into the like varied personal experience of, I'm a proponent of fuck around and find out with the ancestors. How do I know they will guide me along a path they may not agree with? Just try it. I mean, literally, all you can do is try and see what happens. I know it isn't ideal to have an ancestor altar in your bedroom, but circumstances make this and mine people's other option. What can we do to make the space more comfortable for them? Curtain. You can make them a closet altar. Just make sure it's like not closed all of the time. But that really depends on like your ancestors and your personal experience and what they want. So ask them. What is one or more piece of advice you wish you had when you started ancestor work? This is your ancestors are yours. I wish someone told me very early on that the easiest way to communicate with my ancestors was literally through me and just by talking to them myself, because I feel like we very often try to outsource readings for ancestors and all these other things, and oftentimes they just want to talk with you. And it takes time to learn how to communicate with them, but it's still the best option. Also, you can tell them no. You can say no, we're not doing this right now, or no, stop. If you don't want them to talk to you, just forget an offering for a little bit. And you're allowed to do that because everybody needs a break. You're allowed to say not right now, shut up. I wish I had learned early on that I could make more boundaries with my family, and now I have them. Okay, I feel like this was a speed run and there were some questions that I was like, I don't think this is gonna be helpful, but I hope that some of it was. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have more videos coming out soon, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Siete Benedetti.